That's how they understood the Christian faith. For Ancient Faith Radio, this is Father Thomas Hopko.
And that was Speaking the Truth in Love with Father Thomas Hopko. Father Tom is Dean Emeritus at St. Vladimir's Theological Seminary. This is a listener-supported production of Ancient Faith Radio.
Proclaiming Christ, victor over sin and death. You're listening to Ancient Faith Radio, your Orthodox Internet radio connection.
Welcome to Live with the Louhs with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Louh, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. My name is Father Nicholas Louh, and I'm joined tonight by my lovely wife and my co-host, the better half for sure, Dr. Roxanne Louh.
Hello, everyone. I'm not so sure I'm the better half here.
Well, especially tonight because of our conversation tonight on healthy communication, we're gonna say that you are, as always. But we're so grateful, friends, that you're joining us tonight on this October 5th evening. We're just so delighted that you've taken the time to join us. You know, if you're new to Live with the Louhs, it is a ministry of St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in the city of Jacksonville, Florida. That's a church that Roxanne and I serve, and honored to be here. We're coming up on 15 years of being the parish priest there, and just such a blessing to be with that community. And our hope and our prayer when we started the show a couple years ago was just to give you some practical tools that you can live by in your own walk of faith. And we merge faith and psychology to help do that. And so we are honored you're here. Our show airs every single Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Ancient Faith Radio. We would love for you to stay connected to us on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. In fact, our show is actually broadcasting live on our Facebook page. All of our platforms, including YouTube, where all of our sermons are all under the headings of our last name, which is The Louhs, and that's spelled Louhs. That's The Louhs. And we also want to invite you to receive our daily inspirational messages of encouragement. We send these out every single day at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. If you receive them, do us a favor, share them with your friends and family. If you receive them on our Facebook platform or on our Instagram platform, for sure, tag us or share, and then share them with your friends. We just want to share God's word, and hopefully it's some inspiration to your friends, and also just to give some light to this world.
Speaking of inspiration, I just want to do a shout out to thank all of you who have been writing in to us about those inspirational messages. I can't tell you how life-giving it feels to the ministry. To hear your personal stories and to hear your personal comments about a certain blog that may go out that day. That truly does speak life into what we're doing and helps direct us into the direction people need most. So just wanted to give a shout out. And for those of you on Facebook, be sure to interact with those posts. I know that the algorithm of Facebook does tend to stop putting it on your page when you don't interact with it. So, in addition to those emails you guys are sending out to us, feel free to be posting directly on that page.
Absolutely. And so if you're interested in receiving those daily inspirational messages, we encourage you to go right now to the website, our website, that's thelouhs.com, and click on that subscribe button. It's look in the far right corner. And all you have to do is simply put in your email address, and you'll receive a daily word of encouragement. Actually, tomorrow morning, you'll see one. So we encourage you to do so. And also, a couple of years ago, actually, we came up on this just last week, Roxanne. 2 years ago, we published a book called Renewing You, a Priest, a Psychologist, and a Plan. And it has been really a labor of love that we have just wanted to offer. It is a book that takes basically the 8 biggest principles that we see that we've kind of dealt with as both a priest and psychologist, and kind of tackle them in what we like to call practical Christianity, where we kind of merge faith and psychology together to tackle these issues that so many of us face. So if you're looking to renew your faith or renew your marriage or really renew your thoughts, how powerful our thoughts are, definitely look at Renewing You. All of the proceeds from this book go to outreach ministries on both inside and outside the walls of St. John the Divine. So just as a reminder to all of you to take that out. And it's also available not only on Ancient Faith, but it's also available on Audible, in which Roxanne and I record our voices, and the book is in our voices, so we encourage you to do so. All right, friends, so let's get started. We want you to know that we'd love to hear from you. So in this conversation, as we do in every show, call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can email us a question and ask. That's ask@ancientfaith.com during the live broadcasting of our show. Again, it's ask@ancientfaith.com. So tonight we are really talking about something that I think we should be talking about a lot. And we're talking about successful communication in marriage. I want you to think about this for a moment. Imagine for a moment the greatest compliment your husband or your wife ever gave you. What was that? Now think about this for a moment. What was the most hurtful statement that your spouse or your wife or your husband, maybe even a very close friend, shared with you? How did it make you feel? You see, friends, our words have the power to lift people or to push people down. They have power to elevate our wife or decimate her. They can lift up our husband or tear him down. They have the power to heal a marriage or the power to hurt a marriage. For too many marriages, I think, and in relationships in general, we can take for granted our words. We can use our words more to correct than to connect. Roxanne, I'd love for you to share just how powerful, psychologically speaking, our words can be.
Well, I think, you said it beautifully. We really do decimate and send our relationship into, I guess, what I would call negative cycles. Relationships naturally kind of go through these cycles of good times, where just everything feels right and you couldn't feel closer to your spouse, and they just seem like they're your best friend. They're in your corner. It's you and your spouse against the world. And then, suddenly you find yourself entering a very different cycle where there's distance and disconnection. And that can happen because there were subtle resentments brewing. Something was divisive. And, we kind of entered different positions on that division, and, resentment sets in, bitterness sets in, negative narrative set in. And then our words, unfortunately, tend to then follow where our heart has been. And so these negative cycles can be really hard for spouses to get out of. And a lot of times they can kind of, step back into that cycle and go, how did we get here? And I can remember, how great it was, just a month ago. And then this is the same person that I now feel so disconnected from. And, so it is our words. Our words are powerful, but they come from where our heart has been. The Bible talks a lot about that our words are sort of the outpouring of our heart. They are what flows out of our heart. And so I think we have to be really discerning with our words. Proverbs 14:29 says, "Whoever is patient has great understanding, but the person who is quick-tempered, who's quick to speak, is foolish." Why? Because being patient in moments of fury, in moments of resentment, is what breeds understanding, because we don't always know what we're upset about. It takes time to sort out our feelings. And only seconds to completely destroy our connection with our words when we're speaking to our spouse. So, really we have to sit on things. And, research shows women, we are a culprit a lot of the times. 80% of the time, we are the ones bringing up issues, and can often be critical, tearing down, our spouses. And men are more likely to be the ones shutting down from those criticisms. And so I think we have to really ask ourselves, and being discerning, whether the fight needs to happen at all, whether the word really needs to be said. And you mentioned this a couple weeks ago in your sermon, that the magic ratio, right, from Gottman's research on positive to negative interactions really needs to be 5-1. So think about, for every, criticism you're having, for every complaint you're bringing up, to sort of balance the playing field, there really needs to have been 5 positives, 5 exchanges of value, of affirming, of encouragement, of I see you, of gratitude, of appreciation, words that speak life into our partner. So, it really, if you have to have 5 for every complaint, I think we really have to be discerning as to, does this complaint really need to even be shared? Does this criticism even need to be aired? Or do I need to take time and patience to really understand where it's coming from? Because it may not be my spouse at all. Could it be that, I myself am feeling spent? I'm upset at somebody at work, or I'm worried about something that I have coming up tomorrow. And so I think it is that Proverbs wisdom from thousands of years ago is so powerful, that those who are patient gain the understanding that they need, rather than the person who's quick to share, quick to call out, quick to, it really creates those negative cycles in our marriage, and it's what creates foolishness in our marriages.
Right. You're listening to Live with the Louhs. We're so grateful that you're joining us tonight. We are talking about successful communication in marriage. And so we'd love to hear from you at 1-855-237-2346. It's 1-855-237-2346. You can email us a question also during the show at ask@ancientfaith.com. And as a reminder, sometimes in topics such as these, you may feel a little bit reluctant to share your name on the radio, and we totally respect and honor that. All you have to do is simply tell our producer when you call in that you just wish to remain anonymous, and we will honor that, of course. But, Roxanne, kind of getting back to your point about the fact of just realizing that for that ratio 5-1, that I think it's so important for our listeners to remember this, that for every negative statement that we say, it takes 5 positive statements to get you back to where you were before you even utter that statement. So that just kind of gives you the power of our words. And I think sometimes too, Roxanne, the flip side too is that even when we do communicate, how negative that can be. But there's that old adage that says that that one of the biggest lies that we can believe is that we actually have communicated, when in most times we don't communicate. So that's the flip side, is that we think that we actually are communicating how much we love someone or how much we care about them, and then in reality we're really not communicating that at all. And sometimes I know you see this in your practice. I know I hear this a lot in confessions, where marriages are struggling not to just simply hear the words "I love you" or "thank you," but really to feel that person is genuine in that communication.
Oh, I mean, you mentioned the compliment, right? I mean, so think about the last time your partner complimented you. Most likely you had a positive reaction. Most likely you felt valued, you felt seen, maybe appreciated, and that made you then feel fondly toward them, close to them. And that might have prompted you to either give a compliment back, or perhaps even if you don't, it may have prompted you to walk away more likely to overlook their next mistake. So this is when couples are in that really positive relationship cycle, and most of the time when it comes to the positives, we're more likely to think it but not say it.
Right, exactly, and it stays with that.
Yeah. So when you think it during the day, go ahead and write it. Go ahead and write it right now on a Post-it note, and put it on the counter for your partner to find when they come home, or send a text. As you feel it, say it. Take the 2 seconds, because it really does build and breed that positive momentum that you need to not jump into or fall into the negative cycles, because they are so hard to get out of.
Right. Words, remember this, friends, words do not have power unless they've been shared.
That's right.
They don't have power unless they've been shared. And I think it's an extraordinary study as well that we researched recently on that, that going back to this whole understanding of how powerful our words are. And we're going to get to how the Bible speaks about this in just a few moments. But just on a psychological perspective, friends, the way a conversation starts in the very first 120 seconds, we've shared this on the show before, oftentimes dictates the results of that conversation. So for many times, especially in arguments, we can spend hours and hours and hours sometimes. Oftentimes, we may even go to bed at night simply, angry. If we just were aware that the first 120 seconds are the most significant and powerful ways, how we start up a conversation will oftentimes dictate how the conversation goes and how it proceeds.
And that's so hard, right? So the idea there is to be gentle, as the research shares what follows that 120 seconds. We're supposed to be gentle,
right?
And how difficult is it, and if we're honest with ourselves, how difficult is it to be gentle when we feel a fire burning within us? And so, listen, when we want to share words, one of the greatest dangers we have in sharing those words is sharing them when we feel it. So notice when it comes to the positive, we're supposed to share it as we feel it. But when it comes to the negative, we are not. We are not. We are supposed to distance ourselves from that feeling until we get long enough to soothe ourselves down to a calm place to where I'm able to share that with precision, with control, with gentleness, and even with compassion, right? In humility, right? I might want to find some common ground here, and knowing that whatever I'm about to share with you, I too have struggled. Maybe not in that same thing, but in other things. So who am I? I'm not coming at you from a place of superiority, but from a place of, hey, I get it. We all make mistakes. And compassion, and that we look at what else is going on for our partner at the time that they did whatever they did that upset us, right? And also, who are they outside of that moment? So again, we're trying to build the big picture of who they are before we even deliver that piece of feedback, right? So notice how much we have to think about in our minds to be able to reach a place of sharing that feedback gently. And so it is the greatest temptation, though, to want to fire it as we feel it when we're in a state of upset. It's a dangerous place to be, though.
And St. Basil the Great, Roxanne, right to your point, speaks about this. St. Basil the Great, one of the church fathers, so eloquently puts it this way, but also very challenging at the same time. He says, the most common and multifaceted sin is that which comes from our mouth. Let me say that again, friends. The most common and multifaceted sin is that which comes from our mouth. So I think that, again, we're just kind of laying this foundation, friends, that of how powerful our words can be, and how we communicate, just the power of our communication. So the title of this show is, we're calling it a successful communication in marriage. And so if you're in a marriage right now or in a relationship where you're struggling, you're just wanting some keys or wanting some help in helping to strengthen your marriage, and specifically in how you talk to one another, we'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346, or you can email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Roxanne, there are a number of ways that we communicate. Sometimes people say, well, I really don't talk that much, Father Nick. I just kind of stay silent. And I say to them, but silence is communication. It just doesn't have to come out verbally, but it is communication. But there are generally thought to be about 4 different ways that we kind of communicate. And I wanted to kind of highlight those for our listeners tonight, just so that they can kind of just see what category they may be in when they are struggling in communication, how they may find themselves reacting during those difficult times. So the first one was, I think one of the big areas that people oftentimes do is they withdraw. And I think most people that are withdrawers are people that do, as we were saying earlier, they just kind of avoid, they kind of go out to do their own things, they kind of physically withdraw, they kind of give what we oftentimes call the silent treatment, and every marriage has that at times, and you kind of just live where you're communicating without really communicating, and you can go long periods of time, some relationships can go long periods of time with them not communicating verbally, but they're simply in withdrawal.
I mean, when our partner is withdrawing, it is so important to notice that, because, chances are we are not being gentle. If someone is withdrawing, we have to remember they are under attack. They are feeling under attack. And so it is our job, to, as Proverbs says, gentle words are the tree of life, but perverseness breaks the spirit. If someone's withdrawing, you're breaking their spirit. Whether you think you're doing it or not, or whether you are doing it or not, is irrelevant. They are perceiving that. Okay, so being able to kind of step back and approach that person, it's a try again moment. Let me try that again. I notice, maybe what I'm saying is hurtful. Let me try that again. Because if we break someone's spirit in the process of sharing our feelings or trying to win an argument, we win nothing, because that's when we lose the relationship. So in those situations, we're wanting to protect our relationship, not just our position or just our feelings. And so if someone's withdrawing, that is our signal to back up and try that again more gently. We might need space. We might need, let me go think about that. Try that again. How do I want to share it in a way that they can hear it? Because even the passive aggressive, the shutting down, oftentimes those are signs that people are really having a hard time listening. And they're afraid of what's coming. Usually withdrawal is, I'm afraid of what's coming. I remember how this went last time, where this is going to end us in a fight that we can't repair. This is going to escalate.
It's not going to resolve.
It's not going to resolve. And people withdraw in protection. So it's not to hurt. It's not to attack. It's not because what you're sharing is unimportant. It really is because, we have to have compassion for that experience and try to reset if we are the speaker in that situation.
Right. And I think it's important for our listeners to really remember, too, that oftentimes the way we respond with communication is what we've learned, whether it be through our own experiences in our own relationships or that of what we saw growing up. And so sometimes, our parents, God bless them, or the people that were in our lives may have given us, as best as they tried to be and equip us and empower us with the right tools, sometimes the way that, because they may have not had the appropriate tools to know how to deal and communicate in an effective way, we may be carrying that on, and that level of unhealthy behavior, unhealthy communication, you might see yourself doing the same thing that you saw your dad talk, to your mom about, or vice versa. So be aware of that. Be cautious of that. That sometimes those things can be generational. They can carry on.
Absolutely. So, and so that may be like, reacting to you doesn't necessarily mean you're not being so gentle. Could be that person never even learned how to voice their opinion. And
Right.
so they shut down completely. And it takes time to, bring them out of that and figure out. So, usually what I see in that situation, I would say, and you probably have seen the same thing, there's this chasing mentality where when someone's shutting down, we kind of continue to chase them and draw them back in, but they may not be ready
because of our own uncomfortability oftentimes.
because we are uncomfortable. But do you need some space? Note with your words the observation, what you're seeing. You seem shut down. Do you need some space? Can we try this again? Maybe a little later. It gives us both time to think about how to proceed. But a lot of times when we come at people with anger, we are coming out of nowhere and we're surprising them. And they're going from secure and okay to suddenly not okay, and they feel under siege. So I think it's important to have a lot of compassion for that, to make space for that, and to both be able to come back to the table with an openness and ability to kind of restore the situation gently, get on the same team, right?
I think it's so important, Roxanne. I think it's one of the things that I'd love for you to share with our listeners tonight is what Dr. John Gottman, who's a very famous psychologist, what he speaks is one specific way of communicating that oftentimes is a leading indicator for later on for divorce.
Oh, the contempt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about that. So if we talked about withdrawal is one way, contempt, friends, is one of the leading indicators of that will oftentimes lead to divorce. So Roxanne, maybe just expound on this and how what that exactly looks like. The belittling, the talking down to our spouse.
It's the sort of taking a superior position over somebody and taking not just a complaint, but turning it into a criticism, and then taking that criticism and making like a character assassination. This is a part of your character. This is a defect in who you are. It's really a devaluing of somebody, and we can do that when we're upset. Even the most well-intentioned people can end up in a place of contempt if they allow themselves to go there. And so we have to be really careful that we're looking at every complaint we have as a need that we're trying to honor, and a problem solving, an opportunity to problem solve and brainstorm how to make this better. It's trying to remember we're all on the same team here. This person, my partner, may not understand who I am in this situation. It's my job to explain it, but it's our job to brainstorm how to make it better. We do not want to turn that into, here's what's wrong with you. Here's everything that's wrong with you. Here's why you're always going to do this. It's the pointing of the finger and the shameful assassination of their character. That kind of belittling, yes, is the greatest, predictor of a couple that later divorces. Why? Because we don't forget that. We do not forget those words that are spoken over us.
I think that's so important, is that oftentimes as we began the show, we talked about, how many of us can remember some of the greatest compliments, but we can by far remember more than negative things that are spoken to us. I remember things that teachers spoke over me when I was in elementary school. I may not even remember the day of the week, but I remember what they said. I don't even remember the context, but I remember what they said. And so often, we may not even remember the argument itself, but we remember what was said and how it made me feel. And so I just think that for all of us, I mean, the power of our words, and especially in belittling one another, how significant that is. It is a warning sign for any marriage right now. If that is something that you're experiencing, that this ends up leading to a very dark path in a marriage.
Yeah, and I think, when we belittle, it's really important to remember, why are we doing that? It's because I'm assigning intention to what someone did.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not allowed to do that. We are not allowed to tell someone, here's why you did this.
Mm-hmm.
Here's who you are because you did that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be really careful that we are not assigning our own judgments to somebody else's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know why somebody did what they did. And just because somebody did something doesn't make it wrong. And so, it's our job to explain how something affected us, how it made us feel, what we need instead, and to help brainstorm how to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
But it is never our job to blame and criticize and condemn somebody and to tell them why they did it.
Right.
And that's often where people end up when they're fighting.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think
Here's who you are.
Exactly. We start writing their story.
Yeah, we tell them who they are because of what they did.
Right.
Which is unfair.
Right. So that brings us to the third one. That's the third area that I think is some of the unhealthy ways that we communicate, and that's what we were going to call the wrong narrative. It's where basically we have created a storyline in our mind about the intention of that person without allowing without really believing what that person is truly is saying. So that, in other words, we don't trust them. And then not only that, we continue to really just perpetuate this belittling, this contempt, this negativity. And so be cautious, because oftentimes we share this. We've got a whole chapter in our book on this. But the devil is a liar, and he is the father of lies. And oftentimes what he does, one of the ways that he impacts us, is he uses our thoughts as a way of allowing us to, because he knows that we act on our thoughts. So always remember us telling you this, that your beliefs will always shape your behaviors. So the stronger your beliefs are in Christ will shape your behaviors in the world. Same thing, the flip side is that the stronger beliefs that you have about someone will shape your behaviors towards them. So that wrong narrative, that's why the Bible is so cautious and so reminding us about the importance of watching what we think and how powerful the story that we're following, how much power we let it have in our lives, because it impacts the behaviors that we're doing.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's the storyline of, you never help out in the house, comma, because you're selfish.
Right.
There's the assignment of narrative. There's the judging someone for who they are. You never listen to me because you think you're better than me.
Right.
It's the comma. It's the what follows in our mind about somebody as to why they're doing it. It's the part that follows the comma that we're not allowed to do. And even the beginning, we have to really shift over to, rather than you are always on the phone when we're together, how about I really want to spend time with you? How about I need your help in the house because I'm feeling overwhelmed? It's taking a little bit of ownership for what's going on within us instead of, blaming somebody and assigning this judgment over who they are. We don't know why they're not helping us. We don't know why they're, distracted, but, I'll never forget, I had, a wife, tell her husband, I've been mad for 21 years that when you come through the door, you don't walk over and give me a hug and kiss and greet me. And you go straight upstairs to put down your stuff and change your clothes. And he said, I never in a million years knew you felt that way. He said, I was just trying to change and get comfortable so we could come downstairs and be together. And, here he is thinking, I'm trying to get ready myself to be present with you. and she's mad because he wasn't present at the moment she wanted him to. And here she had been assigning this narrative to, he doesn't care about me. I'm just not important. He cares about himself. And she had that part that we do after the comma, labeling somebody, defining who they are, that really creates this disconnection and sort of negative sentiment and shift into the negative cycle. Remember, hidden resentments create negative cycles, and those are the ones that are tough to break. So we have to stop what we're doing after the comma. When we notice, oh, this is bothering me, it's how do I talk about it in a way that owns it, in a way that, brainstorms how we fix it, in a way that says, hey, you're not at fault because I feel this way. I just take ownership of the fact that I need this. It's as simple as that. So we have to really hold ourselves accountable when we're getting upset and chastising someone in our mind for something that they're doing or not doing that they may not think about. He said, after 21 years, I never knew that was important. If you told me that,
right.
I'd be there. I'd be there.
So we're just sharing with you at the top of the show. We're just basically sharing with you ways that oftentimes we can just simply communicate in an unhealthy way. And keep in mind, friends, that these are, we can go on and on about this, but just to remind you, one is withdrawal. We just simply withdraw from the situation, thinking that that's going to be helpful. But even in that silence, we're communicating, oftentimes with that kind of silent treatment that we oftentimes talk about. There's also the contempt. We said that this is one of the leading indicators of belittling people. It's one of the leading indicators that lead to divorce. So be very careful with this. We also talked about the wrong narrative, this wrong storyline that we've created in our mind that not only, as Roxanne was saying, is that do we say that, you're never home, but also with the comma, because you're selfish, or that because, or placing a label as to why they are the way they are, which is equally as, I would argue, very demonic in the way in which we do that, all of us at times fall prey to. And then finally, I would say is escalation. We just sometimes we can, again, if we've kind of grown up in a home where tempers were oftentimes escalated, or when people would yell or scream, we grew up with that. Maybe that's something that's how we deal with ourselves now in arguments. But as we've shared in the past, this is also an area that you have to be very cautious of, because we think that the louder we are, the more effective we are. But study after study in effective communication, especially in trying to heal and resolve arguments, says that's one of the most unhealthy ways is through escalation, through yelling. So please, if you are one of those people, the most effective way of communicating is oftentimes in a very low or whispering voice. You're listening to Live with the Louhs, and tonight we're talking about strengthening our marriages, and specifically strengthening through our communication in marriage. And so I hope that these have been very helpful for you. We just kind of really been sharing just ways that we communicate in an unhealthy way, but we'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. So I just want to kind of give you this principle that I think is so important to remember, friends, and that is that our words can change our marriage world. It can change our children's world. Our words can change the world. And so it's so important for us to kind of remember those. I'm going to share with you just some Bible verses that I hope will kind of inspire you. There are verses that I strongly encourage you, if you can, to write down. This is one from the book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verses 21. It says this: death and life are in the hands of the tongue. I love that. So it just shows you that our words can either bring death to a relationship or life to it. I love that we hear from another area in the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, verses 9 says, the hypocrite with his mouth destroys his neighbor. Just powerful how much it does. And an extraordinary Bible verse in the New Testament from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12, verses 36 to 37, listen to what it says. But I tell you that men, you will have to give an account on the day of judgment of every careless word you have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you'll be condemned. Again, friends, just the power of our words. And so I want to kind of just give you a verse that I think hopefully will encourage all of you. It says this. It's found in the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verses 29. It says, do not let any unwholesome words come out of your mouth, but but only that which is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit all of those who listen. Notice the words here. Not only does it help to build that person up, but all of the people who are hearing the way you're communicating to that person. Just powerful.
I mean, that I love that, building others up according to what they need. Listen, we don't always know what people don't do well is usually not malevolent. It is a lack of awareness or lack of tools. So, our words are supposed to help them, give them what they need to soar, not tear them down because of what they lack. So so much of what we are doing in these moments is teaching. Here's what I need, and here's what could help in you helping me get my need met. It's not usually something someone's doing on purpose from a malevolent, space.
I'm reminded of what St. Theophan the Recluse, one of our church fathers, he said this way. He said, remember that when you speak, you're giving birth to words, which once born, they never die, but will continue to live until the day of judgment.
Wow.
It's just extraordinary.
Absolutely incredible.
So what we're seeing is that not only does we see it in our own lives, in our own personal stories, the power of words that have been impacted on us and shared over us. We're not only hearing the extraordinary words of our Savior Christ speaking in the Bible and through the through the apostles, but we're also seeing the church fathers again speaking about the power of our words. And again, I remind you that our words can change the world.
So if we want to be intentional with our words, recognize, we can't say them as we're feeling them, right? So the importance of taking a break is so vital for our flesh so that our spirit can soar, right? So that might mean going for a walk. That might mean sleeping on it. Somebody in the Facebook, wrote in just now, hey, should we talk about things when we're tired at night or when we're so exhausted in the morning? No, take time, take a break, get your mind on something else, do some work, organize something, go to the gym, because that time is healing. In that time, we're not simmering on everything that's wrong. We're focusing and meditating on what can make it right, so that when we deliver it, we don't deliver it with condemnation. We deliver it in a teachable, gentle way. We restore that person gently, as the Bible tells us, right? So it is so important that we are taking that break and using that space to label exactly what it is that we are needing, and doing it in a way that is gentle and kind.
Roxanne, you and I worked on a sermon a couple of weeks ago similar to this topic, and we were talking about, we used this word grace, this gift, this spiritual gift that we get from Christ, and how we're also called to extend grace. And so I love to kind of utilize some of what we talked about a couple of weeks ago in our sermon, but and use the letters of the word grace to kind of remind us of really how we do communicate with our spouse. And so if you've got a pen and a paper around, friends, I'd encourage you to write these down. But I think number one is the G, and that is be grateful. I've been very blessed to be a priest now for 15 years, and I can't tell you, friends, how many confessions I listen to, hundreds, where I will hear a spouse say, I don't need them to tell me every day, thank you. I don't need them to kind of, always be praising me. But once in a while, I would just love for them to say thank you for what they do. And how many marriages and relationships are struggling so much with something as simple as truly from our heart saying, hey, thank you. Because it's not only just acknowledging the thank you for that, it's saying that I see you. I see what you're doing, what you've done. And I think so often in the relationships that are struggling, you can feel forgotten.
And we can do that even when we're about to present a complaint, thanking them for, all the other ways in which they're doing great, right? We sometimes forget to bring in the negative or positive in the negative moments. But research also tells us that that's a powerful foundation for people to receive negative feedback upon, is that they know that they're loved and valued in every other dimension. And so it can make it easier, to receive it.
This is how Mother Teresa says it. She says, words which do not give the light of Christ to others increase the darkness in the world. And so you always ask yourself, am I truly bringing Christ's light to my wife, to my husband? the book of James, just an extraordinary book, one of my favorite books in the Bible. I just enjoy reading it, and it speaks so much to, I think, where we are as a society today. It says, with the same tongue we praise God. He's talking about our words, and for us as Christians, with the same tongue that we praise God, to praise Him how much God has done for us, how holy He is, that we praise and we bless and we worship the Lord, and with that same tongue that we praise God, we use it to curse our brothers and our sisters. And then he says this extraordinary statement. He says, this cannot continue to happen. And so I think that, for a lot of us, we don't realize that, when we're not bringing life to the relationship, when we're bringing, our negative words or just constant criticism, constant complaining, that for many of us, we're just kind of sucking the heart out of the relationship. And James is telling us, hey, this can't happen. You can't be praising God while at the same time cursing your wife or cursing your husband. So we encourage you, number one is be grateful. Be grateful. Here's the second one with R, and that is be respectful. Be respectful. I think that it's so tempting, Roxanne, and I know you hear this all the time in your practice. When we get angry, and all of us do, we all lose our temper. We just all need to own that. We all at times lose our temper. We get angry. We get frustrated. Sometimes we can slam doors, slam drawers, speed off or whatever. It's so easy to be disrespectful in our relationships, and especially when we're having an argument. And I think that one of the things that we have to own is that yes, we become so accustomed to that, and even on television right now, we see this becoming so normal now that we just yell and scream or just say the things that. But the Bible says this, that one of the hallmarks of being a Christian says this in Romans chapter 12, verses 10. Romans 12:10. It says, always outdo one another in showing honor and respect. I love that. In other words, we're not supposed to just simply be respectful to those who are just being respectful back. We're supposed to outdo that. We're supposed to outdo that in the way in which we do the way in which we live our lives. And I
think with the respect, remember the words of St. Mark the Ascetic. We posted on this today. The devil makes small sins seem smaller in our eyes because otherwise he can't lead us to do greater evil. And how often do we overlook the slightly disrespectful tone, the slightly disrespectful comment? Sarcasm is huge here. And we see sarcasm everywhere in our society. And I always say, like, if you were to take out the, oh, I'm just kidding, and it would sound rude, then it is rude, right? So
right.
We can't, and we do that a lot. And I think that the enemy wants us to kind of minimize these small sins. It's not a big deal to be disrespectful. It's not a big deal to speak, negatively, to take that rude tone or to just use kind of passive aggressive behavior. But it is a big deal. And so the Holy Spirit really can't be at work within us fully, leading us, if we're allowing half our heart to be sort of hijacked by that sort of disrespect that we have toward people. And listen, I think we need to also remind all of you, this is not easy. We're talking about principles, we're talking about virtues, we're talking about foundations that build strong homes. But it takes a constant level of resetting and a constant sort of discernment over what our emotions are almost constantly threatening to hijack and control. So, this is a lot of self-awareness. This is a lot of taking a step back. This is a lot of, trying to contain a lot of what we're thinking and feeling and, and sort of, make it obedient to what Christ would will for us. And so this is not easy. And so that's why some of these, you always say, Nick, and I think it's such a great idea, refrigerator verses, to have some of these scriptures, on your fridge is a reset. When you see it, you can respect, your spouse and say things a little differently. So I just wanted to kind of make that note so it doesn't seem like, hey, we should be able to be nailing this. Right.
And I think,
all the time.
and I think, I think in total transparency, I think we, as is in every relationship, we don't always get it right ourselves. I think that's what we're hoping and praying that this show provides for all of you listeners, is that it's an opportunity for us to kind of give some practical ways to apply our faith, and also to realize that, we're all in this together. We've said this before, and we'll say it again. I think always remember, when it comes to respect, is that honor elevates our world, honor elevates our marriage, honor elevates our children, but dishonor decimates them. Honor elevates, dishonor decimates. I think that one of the things that we are all called to do is to affirm, something, to affirm the qualities of our spouse, telling them just how amazing they are. I think it's so important. I know that for me, Roxanne, one of the things when we did the 5 love languages, and took the test, on a regular basis, as we take that test almost every year, is the number one for me has always been words of affirmation, and especially words from you. I mean, as my wife, I can hear complaints or challenges from people or things that people would love to see different. It doesn't really affect me, but your words, when you affirm a quality that you see in me, just elevates me. And I think that that's one of the things that I would encourage. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that love to just, in a humble way, I say this, would love to be just like have someone affirm what they're good at, what God has blessed them with, what their grace that is. I know you always tell me, Nick, God has blessed you with the gift of, giving a sermon or giving retreats or whatever. But it lifts them up greater than simply just acknowledging that one detail of a topic, whether it be a retreat or a sermon. It also acknowledges the fact that, hey, I see you. I see what God has blessed you with. So be, friends, when you're hearing my voice tonight, if you're there with your spouse, look for a quality that you see in them, because that's a quality that God gave them. And when you affirm that, you're really seeing Christ in them. You're acknowledging the gifts that God has given them. And St. Paul says that we should be constantly fanning the flames of the gifts that God gave us. And so sometimes we may need our spouse to say, I see that in you. I see that in you, and I'm fanning that flame.
Yeah, and I think where I've seen this so, to where it struggles in marriages is, if people aren't used to compliments, growing up, maybe they weren't given a lot of compliments, or maybe being affirmed was not a strong foundation in their family. So it's something that they don't even think of. And, in learning that is how people are loved, it's something, we have to remember as a foundation for conscious love, the expression of that. Love is supposed to be a verb, right? And so we are supposed to be thinking about how to give it. How am I doing loving my spouse, recently? When was the last time I did think of something that I loved about them? Most of the time we're thinking about what we don't like about people. And we're also not as comfortable. Some people are not as comfortable affirming, but it is a very strong love language, especially for men. Research has shown that it's very powerful, for men. So affirming is absolutely so powerful.
We called it a couple of weeks ago in a sermon. We said that we are all called to be CEOs, Chief Encouragement Officers. Chief Encouragement Officers. So that's what I encourage you. You've been deputized today. Go out and be a CEO. I think number 4 would be is the C. Be courteous. I've done some research on this, and I've shared this in the past in sermons as well, is that, when you look at some of the things that Christ disliked the most, 3 of the 6 of them that I found, at least in my research, all dealt with communication. They all dealt with how we communicate with one another. St. John Chrysostom, speaking about the importance of being courteous in our speech, says this: God has surrounded the tongue with a double wall, a barrier of teeth and defense of the lips, in order that it may not easily and heedlessly utter words we should not be speaking. I think that's just so great that, it just shows us how much that even in the physiological, our own physiology, that God has created not only teeth, but lips and a tongue, all to protect what comes out of our mouth. And so I just encourage you, friends, make sure that you're being courteous, because to be quite honest with you, I think that's what we're seeing in a world right now that's really just struggling with our inability to be courteous to one another.
Friendliness, manners. I think, what we've really started to see in society is anything goes. We have really, when we're first dating, everyone is super, full of manners, very courteous, as you're saying, and our words are full of grace, and we say things so softly, and I think that's something we really, but again, what is affecting our ability to be courteous? Normally it's, not being intentional on a regular basis, but also it's our emotions. When we're fuming about something, when we've entered these negative cycles, that's one of the number one places I hear that people struggle with being courteous because they're secretly bitter. And it's almost like a silent betrayal that happens in the marriage when we have been telling ourselves storylines about our partner. We stop being courteous because we don't think about going to bring them a drink when they're working outside, right? We don't think about going to grab the groceries when our spouse comes home from and they're carrying everything, and we don't think to go help them or greet them because we're not excited to see them. So it starts with, oftentimes our lack of being courteous starts with the narrative we've been speaking. So if you don't feel you've been courteous, I would ask you to reflect on, what have I been telling myself after that comma? How have I been defining them? Because that does infiltrate how we feel and then how we eventually treat in the good times and in the bad times. Like I said, we won't be courteous even when we have the opportunity to. And so, reflecting, there was a question that came in the email about this, but what do we do when our emotions are so raw like that? Other than taking space, and in that space, we are trying to label what it is that's actually going wrong, what it is that actually is upsetting me here, what it is that I'm actually needing. And I'm actually brainstorming what I think I could, present as solutions here, the tip of what I'm looking for. If we can't do that, then we may just be indulging the urge to criticize our partner. So that's the power of, taking an emotion and turning it into something actually productive. If there is nothing productive that is coming, no different way that I'd like to see things, or no positive request, we probably are just, upset about something else, bitter about something greater. There could be something else infiltrating from our own life. So, really what helps us in that situation is studying ourselves, labeling it, identifying what's going to help us move forward here, and just, taking a long enough break to where our body calms down and we don't feel that blood pressure rise, the heart rate rise, the lump in our throat. We're just calm when we present it, when we finally present it.
There's just a few minutes left of our show tonight. We've been talking about over the last 45 minutes about really just how do we communicate, how do we strengthen our marriages in our communication with them, and we hope that you've enjoyed the show. We do encourage you, before we conclude our show, to, if you haven't or are not receiving our daily inspirational messages, go to our website right now. Just go to thelows.com and click on the subscribe button. All you have to do is simply put in your email address and we'll get to that. You'll receive a daily inspirational message tomorrow. And if you're already receiving those, friends, definitely do us a favor. If you're getting them on Facebook or on our Instagram page or on our email through your inbox, share them with your friends and family. So we're at the last one. We've talked about gratitude. We've talked about respect. We've talked about affirming one another. We've talked about being courteous. And we've talked about the importance of all these different things. But I want to end with this last one, and that is empathy. We empathize with them. I don't know if you're aware of this, but 70% of what goes on in our conversations, oftentimes people don't even hear. Because in that argument, oftentimes all they're thinking about doing is responding back to that person. So almost 70% of a conversation, especially an argument, oftentimes is not even heard, because all we're thinking about is, how do I respond to one statement they're doing? So they're not even hearing that. And so I want to remind you that, listen, and I think Roxanne beautifully said this earlier, is that we have to be careful of that narrative that we're on, that wrong story of what, and that belief that we know what they're doing or why they acted that way. No, not everyone that does something that hurts you meant to do so. We have to learn to give people the benefit of the doubt. Remember this: mistakes are not life sentences, they're life lessons. Mistakes are not life sentences, but life lessons.
I mean, empathy, incredibly important. We had actually a couple of questions that came in about empathy. And yet, listen, this is easier for people who are dispositionally feelers because they make decisions and operate out of a foundation of seeking harmony. They are looking to repair and fix because they are living in the brokenness. They feel it and it's so uncomfortable. And so feelers are a little bit better at empathy, at going, hey, I think I can understand why you might have felt that way. I could see how that might bother you. They're really feeling with you as you're sharing, and they get it, and they're motivated to repair it. Okay, so if you're married to someone who's struggling with the ability to validate you or to empathize with you, it could be that they are much more analytical by nature and not feelers. And so they are really analytical people have a very hard time dispositionally agreeing with something or trying to make sense of something they don't agree with. They're very much in that doesn't make sense to me. But what I would tell the analytical person is that just because you can understand the experience of somebody doesn't mean you agree with it. It just means you can understand how they might arrive at something based on how they are presenting it to you. So that's the key, is sort of following hey, based on everything this person is saying from an analytical standpoint, I can see how they might arrive at that feeling. Okay? You are not saying that you feel it, you agree with it, you would feel the same thing in that situation, because probably you wouldn't. But it is so important that we learn to make room for two truths, two perspectives, so that we can actually make the statement, I see how you could arrive at feeling that way. Based on everything that you're sharing with me about how you see it, how you think about this, I can see it. Okay, so even the analytical person can get used to that process. But the feeler is going to arrive there a bit more organically. And so the validating step, the empathy piece, that it's not all created equal depending on how you're wired. And personality plays a big role in how we conflict with each other.
I love that, Roxanne. So let's just review that real quick, friends. We remember the word grace, and we just remind ourselves of the letters of the word grace, that we are supposed to be filled with gratitude for our spouse, that we are respectful, that we affirm, that we're courteous, and that we empathize. And remember this, friends, that our words can change our marriage. It can change our world. We want to thank you so much for joining us this evening and for just taking the time to be with us on this Tuesday evening. As we do every couple of weeks, we kind of share with you where we're going to be speaking next. Roxanne and I are actually going to be in Sacramento, California. If you're anywhere near the Sacramento, California area, we're going to be speaking at Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church there in Sacramento. We're doing a retreat all about our purpose, about for finding you. We're speaking to young adults about finding you, in other words, finding their purpose. And then we're also going to be speaking on Saturday. These are on Friday, October 21st and Saturday, October 22nd, to a whole bunch of adults on Saturday, speaking about how do we renew our life to fulfill God's purpose. So renewing our life to fulfill God's purpose. If you live in the Sacramento area, we'd love to have you come on out there. We're going to be there and just look forward to meeting you there as well. We want to thank Matushka Trudy for producing tonight's show and all the great people here at Ancient Faith. We love being part of the Ancient Faith family. And we thank you for taking the time to be with us. As I mentioned earlier, if you would love to receive our daily inspirational messages, go to thelowe's.com, click on that subscribe button, and join us, though, next Tuesday for a brand new Live with the Lowe's show. Everyone, have a great night. Stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist,